and we'll get into, all right, now we're live officially. We're now recording for realsies. We'll get into what we got going on today. So first things first, what I have outlined for us to do today is this assignment 5.1. So this is in essence your contract, like I keep referring to them as. And also, since we're live, your phone should be zipped up. You should not be playing Snake in the front of the room like I can clearly see you. So let's not do that, please. Your phone should be zipped up, distracting tabs should be closed, all the usual stuff. This currently has a due date of this Friday, just this assignment, as well as whatever else we've got going on. The due date is always going to be found there like normal. But the deadline is after break, January 5th. So you still have some time to finish that one up, even after, good morning, we're in the Zoom room, even after school has taken our winter break. Okay, so your contract is asking you to create a web page, which in this case for now is just our HTML file instead of an entire root, and a style sheet that has these three specific things that the client is looking for. The client has provided you with some assets, which I'll show you how to use here in just a second, in order to accomplish the three things outlined by their goal. But before we get into any of the actual specifics for 5.1, I want to show you the way that I want you all to be setting up your root folders. So if you remember back from Monday, this is not what we're working on. So I'm going to open up my folder by going File, Open Folder, and then finding my second period web design. I should have a folder called Unit 5, which I don't. So let me make that real quick. I think I used first period's example when I was showing you guys on Monday. So this is B. Blakeney P2, and your file name should just be Unit 5. And then inside of Unit 5, you should have an SRC subfolder as well as a styles subfolder. This is just a review from Monday. And that should be the only, that's the styles folder. So go back to File, Open Folder, go back a few steps to second period web design. I'm just going to click on my Unit 5, just Unit 5 by itself. Select that folder, usual folder selection that we're used to in VS Code. So the only thing that should be in your Unit 5 right now, for the most part, is going to be these two subfolders, and then probably one index page called something like Unit 5 index.html. And that one's going to be set up just like any old HTML file. Title is going to be Unit 5, or my name, caps lock came on accident, B. Blakeney Unit 5, and then just some placeholder that says this is the,
Do you say to make an SRC folder as well?
You should. You can make whatever subfolder you need for like images or music or JavaScript or whatever. But if you have an SRC kind of main way to organize things, that's a good idea too. It's not necessarily required. You just need a subfolder for anything that's not HTML or a style sheet in the root. So this is the home page for Unit 5. On Monday, ours looked something like this, where the only thing we've got going on this index page is just the title, some placeholders, and this is where we're going to put our links to all of our specific assignments, the specific HTML pages that we're going to create for Unit 5. Here, this is going to act like your table of contents, your landing page to navigate around to the different things that we're going to have you experiment with Unit 5. And then when you turn it in, this is the first thing that I'll open up so that I can see all of your assignments here and there. So that's a quick recap of what we did on Monday. The only thing you should really have in your Unit 5 root folder is that index page, kind of that home page. And so what we'll do now for assignment 5.1 is instead of creating an entirely new subfolder or an entirely new root folder with its own style sheet, subfolders, blah, 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 whatever, we're going to all put it inside of this main chapter, so to speak, for Unit 5. So in order to do that, you're going to double click. You can double click in the main space. Remember, the big rectangle means we're going to focus on the root folder of Unit 5. These solid rectangles mean we're focusing on the subfolders. So make sure you click on the big thin rectangle. You can either click New File, or you can double click in the big rectangle, or a third option, you can middle finger click, left click, and go New File right here. I'm just going to name this one like I would if I were creating a root for 5.1 with the full canvas naming scheme of B. Blakeney P2 5.1. And we'll start that HTML. Oops, see, I forgot my key, my file extension. If yours looks like this, it means you just have a text file. The important thing that's changing, other than the usual setup that we're used to, is that you got to include those file extensions because otherwise VS Code is not going to want to behave the way that we need it to. So these should be the only two HTML files inside of your Unit 5 root so far, because we're just getting started with 5.1 here. We'll start this like any normal HTML file, change the document title to the Canvas naming scheme exactly as the file name is. So B Blakeney P2 5.1, and then just add a little bit of placeholder text on line number 10 here so that I know what this is later on once we actually get into the assignment. All of this that I'm doing is just so that you can see how I'm setting things up. If you want to quickly add an element, you can just type the letter of that element and then hit enter. You can also type the letter and then click the wrench icon, and that'll automatically fill it out with the start and end tag if you want to increase your efficiency as a developer. And then in my paragraph right here, I'm just going to put something like this is the page, or this is assignment 5.1 from Canvas, whatever. You don't have to put that exactly. This is just so I can show you guys how this root folder is to be set up. Okay, so this is normal. This is normal setup like we're used to in our HTML stuff. The new important step that you need to keep in mind is that you have to take back to your table of contents. You have to link this new assignment to the chapter summary, the table of contents index page, with an anchor tag. So after my placeholder text, which I'm actually going to change to my name and grade and stuff, or not grade, but like, I'm going to put my name on it. I can type H1 and then hit enter, and it's going to auto fill out like that. So this is my name, this is my class period, and then this is Unit 5. Unit 5. There we go. So on line 11, after I've put my name on my chapter summary on my notebook check that I'm going to turn in at the end of the unit, I need to add an anchor tag to the specific page that I'm actually referencing. Right now, we only have the one with 5.1. So I hit A and then hit enter. You can also click on the wrench icon, and it's going to pop up with all that you need for that specific tag. Inside of the quotes, this is an anchor href, an anchor link like we're used to. We've seen these all throughout the semester so far. This is where you're going to put the specific assignment or project or whatever you're working on that connects back to your table of contents. So inside of my quotes here, I'm just going to type BB, and then it will automatically pop up with 5.1 since it's the only other type of file inside of my root here. And then for the content section, remember you have tag, but that's not an element yet. In order for an element, you need content. I'm just going to put something like 5.1 in there. All of this work is to say, or is to do, that when you turn in your Unit 5 root folder, all zipped up at the end of the unit, each one of the assignments that you do is going to be a little link on this table of contents page that you can decorate however you like. You can put whatever HTML you want in here, whatever CSS, totally optional, but it is kind of a cool sandbox, kind of like a notebook cover that you can doodle on, decorate with, so that I can just see you guys practicing with HTML. Again, totally optional. But yeah, so when I go to grade, I'll unzip your Unit 5 root, and then, okay, it's ready. Let's look at assignment 5.1. I'll click on that, and then this will have the stuff that we're going to cover today with assignment 5.1. You can see the title changes up here like that. Is that making sense? It's the new setup that I kind of want us to take advantage of so that we don't have as many files to zip, as much stuff taking up space. It's all going to be contained in one spot, and make it a little bit easier for everybody. So, let's get into what 5.1 is actually asking of us here. What you can do in order to keep things organized, now that we kind of have this table of contents, you can make a separate subfolder for each of your assignments in the root. So like if I go to second period web design in my file explorer here and open up Unit 5, inside of SRC, I can have a new folder specifically for 5.1 SRCs or 5.2, 5.3, whatever. Or let me actually delete these real quick. Delete those. Okay, cool. Or I can just make a new folder for all of my images, which you will need some kind of subfolder for images. And then I can have another folder for PowerPoints, music, audio, whatever. Okay, so inside of my SRC folder for my whole table of contents, I have an images subfolder, which is important because I need some images from Canvas here. So if you go to Canvas, these are the assets that the client has provided. These are the assets that the client wants you to use. you want to save those to your Unit 5 SRC folder or the one specific to 5.1. So I'm going to right click on my, we'll go with my teacher picture here, my ID picture. Right click on that and save image as. Right now, it's going to pop up, my version will pop up with a file explorer depending on, and ask me where I want to save it. Because right now you can see, check your path. I'm in first period web design. So I want to go to second period web design, go into Unit 5, into SRC, and then into images. I like to be extra specific, sometimes too specific, but this is definitely for sure a way to make sure that I have it saved. And then I'm just going to click save with the default file name like that. I'm using Firefox. You guys are probably on Chrome or Edge. So you'll likely have a download button right here, which you can click on and click on this folder icon to open it within the downloads. Or from your file explorer, there's a downloads button right here that should contain the picture that you just downloaded. We're gonna do that same process, just saving the image from Canvas for my logo here. Right click on that, save image as, go into the SRC folder. You can tell by checking this path real quick at the top of our screen that we're still in semester 1, second period, Unit 5, SRC images, all types of steps in order to get to where I saved my last file. And I'm just gonna click save again, so that when I open up VS Code and open up SRC, you can see SRC/images. There's my 2 images that my client wants me to work with. This is me over explaining a little bit. You guys know how to save images. I just want to make sure that you guys know that they need to be saved to the entire root or to whatever subfolder you have inside your root specific to the assignments, so that you have them as a local link, as a relative path, so that you can use them for this actual assignment. So that's our setup. That's all we really need to do to download from Canvas. That's all the assets that the client has provided, all the pieces they want us to use. Now we can actually start going along with what they want us to create. The first thing we're going to focus on, and I'm going to walk you through these steps. They're also kind of outlined in the PowerPoint, so you can see them if you need reference later on. We need to use CSS background image in order to make this teacher file the background image. So we're going to move away from our HTML because background image, we would need a style sheet for, which I haven't made yet. Let's do that real quick. I skipped this step. Background image is entirely reserved for CSS. You don't have to do any HTML image tag or elements. It's only in CSS. So I'm going to click on my style subfolder in my Unit 5 root. Make sure you have the rectangle for subfolder, solid equals subfolder. New file, 5.1 style.css. Okay, so let's close some of this other stuff we don't need right now. The only 2 tabs that I have open are B. Blakeney P2 5.1 and then the style sheet for that same one. So we need to link our style sheet like we normally do. You can go to the end of line number 6 here and then hit enter. And the same way that you can type P and hit enter for a paragraph element, or A and then hit enter for an anchor link element, you can type out Zelda LINK and hit enter. And it's going to auto pop up with that REL style sheet and the high ref, but it does not have the text equals CSS, which we'll get here in just a second. Inside of our high ref, we're always going to start with the subfolder first, which is styles, and then click on 5.1 style.css to link that to our 5.1 HTML. And the last thing you need to do after that, go outside the quotes and then hit the space bar and type TYPE equals text/CSS. Remember, these are just the parts of the Zelda link tag that you have to memorize so that you always know that they are there. This is all stuff we've done before. This is all stuff we're used to, but since it's in the new root folder, it's just a little bit kind of a different step-by-step or order of steps. So next, what we're going to do is finally get into the style sheet and start working on that background image. So in order to set an image to a background for the entire page, you got to remember that the entire visible web page is contained within the body container right here. Sure, you could write a rule for the entire HTML, but that includes a bunch of unnecessary information for our purposes. It's good information for the site, but we don't need all that data in order to just simply set a background image. So we're just going to write a CSS rule for our body using the background image property. So you should be in your style sheet now. Type out your selector of BODY and then a curly bracket. Inside of that curly bracket container, you're going to type background If you just type back, you're gonna have all these different options here. We want background image. And then the next part after that in the properties section is URL, Universal Resource Locator. You'll see this little cube icon with the parentheses. You do need those parentheses. We're gonna go ahead and click on that. And then finally, inside of the parentheses, we're gonna add quotations. This is a lot of setup. There's a lot of little granular things that need to be met, a lot of little formulaic steps that need to occur in order for this to work correctly. So I'll give you a second to make your body tag look like this while I grab some links that are going to be helpful and attach them to our agenda like first period had. So make sure your CSS looks like this for now, and then we'll get into that in about a minute. Yeah, Pedro, what's up?
Could you help me move over the image so it's accessible through the code now? Where is it there?
Yeah, I'll show you. Alrighty. Okay, so your CSS should be looking like mine for the background image property. I'm working on copying this whole set of links once it decides to open up. Give me just a second. Okay. All right, so now this is where we're going to start introducing that ... / idea from the PowerPoint, because if you think of each of your subfolders or your main folder itself like a staircase, each one of the files at the top is kind of like a door. My style sheet in its present setup cannot look past this door at the top of its staircase. You can see there's a staircase based on the nesting because they're going to continue down the steps as you work through your stuff. With ... / inside of something like a URL, it opens this door on the top of your staircase to allow your style sheet or whatever files in a subfolder to access data outside of that subfolder. So in order to get, because our thumbnail image here is inside of SRC and then images, my style sheet is not going to be able to find that even if I type out the exact file name. Thumbnail, right? It's not seeing anything. VS Code's not giving me any helping hands to find that background image. However, inside of my quotes, inside of my parentheses for my universal resource locator here, if I type ... / you can see VS Code is saying, oh, you want me to expand outside of this subfolder that I'm contained in, open up that door at the top of the staircase, look for SRC, look for IMG, and then it's able to find that thumbnail image 002.png. And so you can just click through all of that, depending on whatever you named your subfolders, whatever you called them there. This is what mine looks like. As long as you have that ... / it will allow you to access the other files within the root folder here. So if we go back to my output, which should be, I think I closed it on accident. I did. Okay, let me re-go live. There we go. Oh, I tried to run CSS. Anytime you go live on a style sheet, this is going to happen. So remember, you can only run HTML. We're going to go to 5.1 instead. Close these pop-ups. Let's try to go live again. Okay, so this is cool. This is a lot of Mr. B's. This is a lot more Mr. B's than the client is looking for. This is an example of what could happen if your client provides you an image that is not going to work super well for what they intend. However, even though there are better options, the client wants a specific image, and sometimes the clients are going to be very adamant and inflexible that they want that specific image. So you as a web designer, you have to problem solve, you have to make it work. You have to get your money, secure your bag in a way that appeases the client. So the first thing that you can change if your background image is not quite behaving the way that your client wants or that you intended is you can add a little bit more CSS into your body selector here called background-size. Background-size, there's a ton of different options here, but we're just going to focus specifically on these two C words inside of background size. If we set it to contain, you can assume, oh, that's going to make my image be contained within the entirety of the viewport, the entirety of the available space here. Let's see if that's true. Not exactly. That is the opposite of the solution to our problem. Way too many Mr. B's. That is not what our client's looking for.
Is it fine like a divisor of like the length and the width?
I'm not sure exactly how it works mathematically, but it doesn't do what we intend. So background size cover, or contain, excuse me, is going to take the entirety of the available space and just fill it up as much as it can with whatever image you have assigned inside of your CSS. While this is quite a dashing background, if I do say so myself, that's not what our client wants. So we're going to experiment with the other option in background size here. Instead of contain, we're going to set it to cover. Cover is going to behave similarly to 100% would, in the fact that the available viewport here is only going to cover it with the single image. This is a lot more accurate to what our client is looking for. Again, it's a little bit scary for sure. Big Blakeney is always watching, so to speak. But when I resize my viewport and experiment around with a couple different versions that the client could look for, you can see that it's going to continue to contain even as I incrementally increase my viewport size here. Incrementally increase my viewport size, it's still going to be contained within the available viewport. Whether I'm looking at this on a tablet screen like this, whether I'm looking at this on a phone screen like this, or whether I'm looking at it on a more full screen monitor like this. Now, you're noticing, again, the client has provided you with a not very high resolution image. The client wants this image, even though you know it's not very clear, even though you know that there could be images that work better. You as a developer will have to understand that sometimes the client will want a specific thing, and unfortunately the client is always right, especially when they're wrong. So keep that in mind. The client is always right, especially when they are wrong. Okay, so
You get that kind of project.
you might. But you can notice here, if I pull my screen down a little bit, there's still a little bit of extra Benjamins happening at the bottom, which is not what our client is looking for either. There's one more CSS property that you can add when you're setting a background image, and that is the background repeat. Background repeat, again, there's a whole bunch of different options, but a majority of the time, you're going to stick to one of these, either repeat or no repeat. There's a couple more specific options, whether you want it to repeat along the x-axis, along the east-west axis, the y-axis, the north-south axis. You can round it, you can space it, unset it, do all this type of stuff that we don't necessarily want to do. We're just going to set it to no repeat. If you can imagine, a background image is typically going to be a landscape. It's typically going to be something that takes up a vertical space more so than a horizontal space. But if we set our background repeat to no repeat, it's going to only use that one image one time, and it's going to scale dependent on how the client is looking for. So these three CSS properties are going to be your easiest or your most commonly used background image properties. So if you want to copy those, take a screenshot of those. Remember, this is being recorded. These three are the ones that I default to, and then I experiment from there. So if yours are looking like mine with your specific image and your specific file path on the URL, you're in a good spot for background images. So I'll give you guys a second to copy that down into your version. While I copy this and paste it somewhere else. We'll go about 30 seconds max for that. Okay. Yes.
If I were to simulate this.
All right, so let's talk about the next part that the client's looking for. We've got the background image. We've got it looking the way they want it to. We're good there. Let's look at the next thing. The next thing, we have a list of quotes, whether that's famous quotes or your own quotes, numbered by Roman numerals. They specifically want the Roman numerals to be the way that on our list appears. And so using CSS, we can change the list style type to a ton of different options. So I need, before I do any CSSing, I need some structure to style. So we're going to go and change this paragraph to either an ordered or an unordered list. Who remembers how to start those?
UL or IL?
UL or OL. I'm going to go UL for unordered list. You can also think of it like bulleted, BUL. And then I'm going to hit enter because this is a container element. So what do I need inside of unordered lists? What do I actually put inside of my list here? Content, sure, but what specific tag? LI for list item. You can type LI and then hit enter. And since that's one single item as compared to a container, we're going to keep that all on one line. Okay, so now your client is looking for, if we check the rubric here, let's see, your client is looking for 5 quotes numbered by Roman numerals. So I need 5 total list items in my container here. Somebody give me a quote. Any quote.
There is no grief like the grief that does not speak.
There is no grief. Who's that?
I don't even know.
We'll go unknown.
It's Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Oh, for sure. Does not speak. Okay. Anybody else got some good ones? Add some quotation marks here. We'll go Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, HWL. I got a few. I'm going to throw in one. LI, enter. Got Hey Vsauce. Michael here. Add some quotation marks. Just do our normal formatting. And this is Vsauce Michael. What other quotes you guys got? I know you got some. We need 3 more. Nobody's got any? None they want to share? Fine. Okay, I'll do all the work. Whatever.
Not all who wander are lost.
That's a good one. Shakespeare. Okay. Who says not all wander are lost?
Tolkien.
Oh, for sure. Not all who wander are lost.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
That's a good one. Okay, that we'll go with that one. Okay, so this is J.R.R. Tolkien. I'll update the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow here in a second.
And you can add that one if you want, but some don't.
I've got one from Chris. I'm going to add here. So what is it? Yesterday's history. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's mystery. That's why we call today the present, right?
Yeah.
Histoi. History. Tomorrow is a mystery. That is why it is called the present. Oh, but today is a gift. Thank you. But today is a gift. That is why it's called the present. Okay, do I have quotes? I do. All right, and that is, of course, naturally, Mastword. Okay, so this is all just killing some time here. We've got 5 quotes, but they have the default CSS list style type of a bullet, which is not what or an unordered list, I suppose. It's not what our client's looking for. So we can go into our CSS, and you have 2 options here. I'll show you how to use both of them. You can either set a rule for the UL, or you can set a rule for the LI, or you can do something cool in CSS with combining your selectors to have the same rule of CSS apply to multiple different elements inside of your HTML. And you would do that with a simple comma. So if I want my CSS to affect both the unordered list container and the list items inside that unordered list container, I can just add a comma in my selector and make it affect both of them.
Mr. Blackman?
Yes,
Would it be an ordered list and Roman numerals?
I'll show you. I will show you. It'll work for both. Okay, so we have an unordered list here. That was a good point, Pedro, because an unordered list by default is not going to have any numeric value. It's not going to ascend in numbers, but we can still give it a try. If we go to our CSS list style type property, it's all the way filled out. That's what we're going to use to change the options here. List style type, it's going to auto pop up with disk. That's the default. We're going to go list style type, and you can see there's a whole bunch of different options, but they want upper Roman. So even though that this is an unordered list with list items, there's no ascending order by default. By setting the CSS to be lower or upper Roman, it's still going to create a numbered list. So you don't necessarily have to be committed to an unordered versus an ordered list, because the list style type is going to be the way that you can change that up later on. You can also remove the styling entirely, and you can make a big long website that's just one big list and then arrange it using Flex and CSS and other stuff like that. But I'm noticing that this is kind of hard to see. So I'm going to go into my body tag on my CSS, and I'm just going to set the color here to white. We're running out of time on the Zoom room, so we gotta wrap this up quick. Got 10 more minutes to talk about float. So if I set my body to color white, that means every single text-based element is going to be white, which is going to contrast a little bit nicer when I resize my viewport and my mug is taking up some of the space here. You can still see, you can still read the text in a little bit more of a legible way. So that clears off two things for 5.1. The third thing that they need is the image of my logo, the B logo, floated to the right-hand side of the screen. So if we go into CSS Float, there's this video here that you can check out on your own time that kind of walks you through how Float is set up. But the gist of Float is it works similarly to Position Absolute in the way that it removes whatever you assign it to from the document flow, and it makes things move around it. It makes text flex around it, and in a way that keeps up with your PARC, your CARP, or the third acronym in your design thinking. All this is to say, we need to first put our structure inside of our HTML here before we do anything too crazy. So I'm going to add IMG. And if you want to add specifically, you don't want to write out the whole shift comma IMG space SRC equals space, do all that work. You can add the name of a tag, like an image, period, and then the name of a class, maybe something like float right with a capital R. Then when you hit enter, it's going to automatically assign SRC alt and give it a class of float right. So it's a way to speed up your developing, as well as make sure that you're definitely assigning the class and making sure that it appears in the right order. So image SRC behaves just like a href. We need to start with our subfolder first. So mine is SRC, and then IMG, and then my file name for the B logo is this BPNG asset number 4.png. Alt text is Blakeney's logo, and there's a class of float right on it. So if we go back to our output, by default, it's just going to appear in the document flow right where it's supposed to. If I right click and inspect on this, take my magnifying glass, my inspector, you can see there's my image with a class of float right underneath my last list item, which is all contained within this unordered list box right here. You can see how they line up exactly. So what we need to do is go into our CSS, so back to 5.1 style, and add a period for a class of float right. You can be specific and add IMG at the front if you really want to, but you can also just have anything that you want to float to the right, have this class on it, and then curly bracket. And then you simply set it exactly as the CSS name is implied. You set the float property to a value of right. And that's going to, in essence, make whatever you set to float right attach to the right-hand side of the screen. With floating, you can think about it like if you're looking down, like I'm looking at my webpage right now, if I were looking over a pool or a puddle of water. So since the B image is set to a float value, it's floating on top of all the layers inside of my pool here. So if I were to resize my viewport, you can see how the image is going to stay attached to that right-hand side of the screen. Since, though, my image is after the unordered list in the document flow, it's not going to flex around it in the way that I need it to. So what I'm going to do is go to my HTML real quick, highlight that image by just clicking line 18, Control X to cut it. I'm going to hit enter on line 10, Control V, so that it appears, oops, not Control A. It appears first in my recipe. It's my first step before my unordered list. If I go back to my output, you can see how that float value is going to create things to flex around it while maintaining whatever nature of the element size is originally established. I'm going to add a quick width to my my logo because it's a little bit larger than I remember. I'm going to go width equals 50% just to make it half the size so that you can see the float happening a little bit more. Okay, so if I, oops, that's the wrong button.
Can you open up the CSS?
Yes, I will in just a second. You can see with this value of float, it's flexing around my unordered list because my B picture is floating on top of this pool of HTML elements and CSS. So this is what your client's looking for. Pretty looking website, if you ask me, to be honest. The guy's got a good logo. What a talented graphic designer. Anyways, so your HTML, because even though the image is in front of the unordered list, because it has that float value, it's going to appear and allow other things to flex around whatever size you have established. So it just makes it easy for your elements to kind of give each other some distance and make sure that things are looking and behaving the way that your client wants and that the way that you want without crossing over or interacting too terribly. So your CSS or your HTML should look something like this. You should have an image and you should have a list of some type with some list items. And then your CSS should look something like this. The things that we covered, that .. allows you to look outside of your root. You can select multiple CSS elements with a comma. So I could put a whole bunch of different stuff like body, like HTML, whatever. Anything that I want, I could even go specific, .float right. You can add a ton of different selectors separated by commas, and whatever CSS you have down here is going to be all affected the same way. But I digress. That we have set our unordered lists and our list items both to be the list style type of upper Roman, and anything with a class of float right is going to stay floating on the right hand side of the screen. I want to show you one more thing while we're almost out of Zoom room time here. If I go outside of my unordered list, you can also use background image to assign the background to an element. It doesn't have to be for the entire body. So if I have a div with a class of picture, for example, div picture, and then I have an image. Actually, I don't even have an image. We just got a regular div. Let me add some text so that appears. Div text. If I go to my CSS and add a quick width and height to that, div dot picture. This is just optional, but this is to show you that background image works for elements as well. Div dot picture width of 100 pixels and height of 300 pixels. And I'm also going to add a little border so you can see how the div exists in the space. 1px solid black. All right, so all of this CSS is just to give my div a little bit of visual information here so we can actually see it on the screen. What I can do is go to my background image URL with the same URL, and I can copy that onto this div box, and it will assign the background image to that div box. You can see it's not going to scale super well. It's also going to reference the top part of the screen right here, the new point of origin inside of this div, but I can also change the background size on that div like this, and it should try to contain it as best it can inside of the div box. Let's try setting that to contain actually. This is optional, but this is to show you that background image does work as well inside of a specific element as compared to the entire body. So I'm going to comment this out. You can keep it or you can experiment with it if you want. If you want to take screenshots or pictures of your CSS, should be looking something like this. Ignoring the comment. I'll give you guys a second to do that. We have 2 minutes left in our Zoom room before I get kicked off, and then I'll help you guys get these set up. Does anybody need more time copying the CSS? All good? Okay. Your HTML should look something like this. I'm going to close my Explorer so you can see the entirety of it. And then this also, I'm going to start, since this helps me keep track of all my stuff here, I'm going to go into my head tag inside of my head container. I'm going to put a version history. Since this is the first version of the site, I'm going to add a little V1 right here, highlight that line number 9, and then control question mark so that I have a little note taken inside of my head container that this is the first version of the site. When I go through and make a major change, I'll update this to V2 and put some patch notes underneath here, like change the image to this, change the scaling to that, and then comment it out so that I have a little record of the things that I've changed inside of my head container. Your HTML should look something like this. If it does, you're in a good spot. And you'll know that it's all working if you run your index page. We got less than a minute, so we'll go super speed here. Oh shoot, that's the wrong button. I'm racing against the clock. Okay, if you run your index page inside of your root folder, which has that anchor to 5.1, if you go live on that, when you click on 5.1 now from your table of contents, it'll take you to the assignment that we just created. So when you submit your work with 5.2, 3, and 4, whatever how many assignments are in the unit, I can just click on each of them and see what we did